look out, here's trouble time for a bit of Jim Does SuperCoach, NBA Supercoach. What is it, week 15? The preview. That's right. Jimmy here from NBA Straya, Jim Does SuperCoach, talking all things NBA Supercoach this week, trade targets, cash cows, the schedule, and interestingly enough, a few PODs. Love a good pod. How did we all go this week? I feel like this one was an absolute minefield this week, right? If you're out there like me, all we did this week, I think, was jump from like one mine to the next of players missing games. It was brutal. So I ended up with a 1,079 points, which had me in the top 4%. Actually went back up 31 spots overall to 559th. Not bad. I mean, the biggest thing for me was obviously the missed games, which I'll get to in a second. The toughest one really was pulling the trigger on the trade that I did at the end of last week's show. Was Josh Giddey coming in. I feel like that hurt a lot of other folks as well because he ended up sitting out a couple of games, rehabbing that hamstring still. So that wasn't very good. But, as we'll get to, it's afflicting a lot of different players. So otherwise, before we get into it, remember, just check how many games your players have. It's the absolute key this week and the next, which I'll dig into in a second as well. And this week, week 15, is a pretty tough one. It's probably one of the tougher ones we've got left on this schedule for NBA Supercoach. So pay attention to who's playing and when. Right, so the latest sort of little bit of news. What do we have? We had missed games. Missed games are plenty for some of our NBA Supercoach faves. Josh Giddey, obviously right there at the top of that list. That was a really tough one. He scores 36 after missing a couple of games. They had a 5-game week this week, and I talked this out last week, right? Head into this 5-game week with a bit of caution around Giddey because I don't know if he's going to play all 5 games. And it turns out he did not come even close to doing so. To the point where you sort of sit there going, well, maybe he'll play that second heat. Nope, just didn't. He played 2 games of the 5. And yeah, that was a bit of a rough one, especially if you've got Deni, Avdija as well. Missed games there. Jalen Johnson missed a game. Even Jaylen Brown missed a game out of nowhere. And if you're looking at that Chicago 5-game week last week, even someone like Vooch, who felt like a rolled gold Supercoach edition, he only managed 83. And other ones out there, just on the sneaky buy and buy, if you're a Lowry Markkanen owner or a Keontae George owner, you're sort of like just transfixed to the Utah Jazz injury report week in, week out, because you just don't know when they're going to be rested or when they're going to play. So essentially, when you're looking at a lot of these scores overall, it is very fraught with missed games right now. Like we saw Jamal Murray miss one last week, missed a couple. This week he was okay, but Jaylen Brown sitting at that 1 game really hurt. You had the Johnson overall score at 83, hurt by a missed game as well. So pay attention. It's really hard, and it's probably one of the really tougher parts about NBA Supercoach, because like you think about the other Supercoaches that we play, AFL, NRL, the multiple game angle, and then being able to only sort of make one raft of changes once a week is not ideal. But we will persevere. Speaking of which, some good news though. Jokic came back. That's good. I don't mind this. I guess the problem is Denver's only got 3 games this week, but we'll talk about this in a second. Giannis obviously out, and the big trade sort of rumor mill is like firing up. It's gone into overdrive this week. The trade deadline is this week. So this is the other sort of bit of news we have to kind of pay attention. It doesn't feel like there's too many giant moves coming, right? Even if Giannis does get moved, and I sort of am still a bit skeptical it happens before the offseason, Giannis is out. So it's sort of like his projections are going to come, in like a month's time if he's on like Golden State or Miami. But it does make a little bit of a sort of interesting wrinkle in there if he does get traded. The players going to Milwaukee will probably walk into a pretty open situation. So the problem is we can't do much about that until next week, can we? Because we don't know who's going to be on there or who's going to be traded. Ja Morant's another one, another sort of big name, but he's obviously injured as well with a UCL. And hasn't been a great Supercoach contributor this week anyway. Well, this year, because he's been so, He's barely played. Also, wildly inconsistent. Elsewhere, I mean, Anthony Davis, same sort of thing, hasn't played. So we're sort of in this like weird holding pattern for the week, especially when it comes to Supercoach. You just have to keep an eye on the trades, try to figure out if someone's going to benefit or, I don't know, get stung. It's interesting to see Dyson Daniels pop off this week as well. So that's pretty good. But it's kind of those things where you're like, ooh, are these guys now playing because they don't want to get traded and they're playing really hard? But I guess the biggest questions are, I mean, trying to get as many players this week on a 4-game week, it's a lot harder. So we always look at the schedule and everything. We'll do that in a second. But out of the week that we just copped, trying to get, an entire raft of full court players on 4 games is really hard when you got dudes just missing games, despite going into the week healthy. And my favorite thing looking at this week was some of the pods that really popped off, because there was a couple. And I unfortunately didn't really have too many of them. But if you had the captaincy on Luka Doncic, smart. That was what I was going with last week. He ends up doing that pretty nicely. Just a lazy 162. The next highest score in Supercoach this week was 126. So, yeah, Luka was the obvious one. Amazingly, it was Paolo Banchero who had the 126, who came second. Cade Cunningham with 125. But the pods this week. Jalen Duren, Jarrett Allen, both scored 119. Jarrett Allen goes off for a massive career game today. Owned by 0.3% of coaches. It's like 102 NBA Supercoaches out there have got Jarrett Allen in the team. Smart. Jalen Duren, only 100, well, 1. I think it was 1.3. That's already up to 1.5% now, with this week having just opened up. But the other one was Joel Embiid, 110 points, owned by 0.8% of coaches. That will probably change a little bit dramatically. It's already up to 1.4 at the time of taping now. That will no doubt continue going up. And the other one I would keep an eye on was I love that Ayo Dosunmu, who I was on a couple of weeks ago, he was the one dude who really benefited on Chicago from the 5-game week because he just played and played and played and played. And when I brought him in, this was kind of like the sort of, the slight hope a few weeks ago, and he just didn't quite have the scoring punch. This week, because he played all 5 games, he had 21, 18, 23, 39. And even though he had an 8 in the final game, you'll still take that, right? He ends up 109. Not bad for AO. He's currently owned by 0.3% of coaches. Good stuff. Naz Reid was the other one. He had 107. He was only owned by I think it was like 1.5%. That's now up to 2%, with Minnesota now with another 4-game week. He's an interesting look, but anyway. In terms of busts, I mean, as I mentioned, Josh Giddey, that was a brutal one. The 36. And I mean, usually the way we do our busts talk is like their ownership percentage versus like their output. Dylan Harper had 61, but that wasn't too bad. I think he'll be okay. You had a really, I mean, if you kept SGA, he had 56 before today's game against Denver and finishes with 103. So that absolutely saved your week, that game where he went off. So good job there. Jokic managed the 69 in only his return. He's just like, I'll just play 2 games and nearly scored 70 points. That was pretty good. He had 46 in the game he came back against the Clippers. There is nothing more Nikola Jokic loves than smashing the Clippers. So Emmanuel Quickley was the other one that I just want to quickly hit on. He had 50 this week. He had 142, I think, in week 13. So he still went up 780K. But yeah, if you're backing him in to go off on with some big points, yeah, not a great one. 31 for Reed Shepherd, still owned by 13% of coaches. 22 for Deni Avdija with the back issues. Not great there. Derek Queen, only 59 as well. I moved on from him finally and sort of dodged that one a little bit. Ryan Nembhard, 10 in 8.2% of teams still. And Cooper Flagg, if you kept him, well done. He had 89, so that was pretty fun. There's like Con Knipple as well. Connie Nips, as we love to call him. 88 for him too, so 26% of coaches still have him. So some pretty interesting scores there. Not too many giant busts, but it was the likes of Deni, it was the likes of Gids, who are in a lot of teams and sort of saw that scoring output just a little bit depressed and not great. Michael Porter Jr. obviously was another big one. He missed a bunch of games due to personal reasons. So if you had him in your team, He was one of the ones that I actually was looking at for Giddey, and you sort of get to that point of like, well, okay, it was talk about a bit of a rock and a hard place, but because Michael Porter Jr. had been playing pretty well for the last little bit and looked like a pretty interesting ad. Mobley was another one who went out injured. He had 24. He's now out for a little bit of time. He's only owned by 4.5% of coaches, but that was still very, very rough. James Harden only managed 53 this week for the Clippers, so yeah, not bad. Anyway, outside of that, who are we looking at for a couple of trade targets for this week? Well, what do we do with trade targets? Jim, we go in and we go hard on the schedule. Of course we do. So who's got the 4 games this week? Who's got 4 games this week? And it's pretty light on the ground, I'll tell you. We have Boston with 4 games. So that's your Jaylen Brown. It's not too many other folks that are really consistent SuperCoach favorites either, right? It's Houston. Alpi Şengün, love that. Kevin Durant, Amen Thompson, Reed Shepherd, if you've still got him, you're feeling okay. The Indiana Pacers, Pascal Siakam, he got named to the All-Star team. Andrew Nembhard still cruising along, but very little else really out there. The Clippers, Kawhi Leonard going off his head here and there, All-Star snub. Always a danger, though, to miss games. And, yeah, you get that on the big jobs, right? But, I mean, you think about the way that the Clippers roll, and like Harden managing 53 this week, Kawhi was 65. I mean, it's just a tough situation for the Clippers. They only had the 2 SuperCoach games, I think, this week as well, didn't they? I want to check that. No, they had the 3, right? And that's why I said Kawhi got to 65. I was going to say, Harden missed a game as well in there. That's why it was like me looking at those scores. I was like, hang on a second. What's going on with Harden? So, with the Clippers, Harden, Leonard, Zoobs. Outside of that is very thin. Memphis as well is just always a tough one now. Like even Triple J, you just can't really back him in to sort of put up consistent numbers. He had 75 this week. Outside of that, it's a bit rough. Minnesota, I feel a bit better about that with their 4-game week. Ant-Man's probably going to be my top trade target this week. Julius Randle, he had 102. In Naz Reid, as I mentioned, 107. Jaden McDaniels managed a 70. Not quite really that great. The Knicks, that's pretty interesting. Josh Hart, Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns. Philly is the fascinating one. Maxey going off his head. VJ Edgecombe crushing it. Paul George has been suspended for 25 games. That means a lot more room for your man Joel Embiid just to keep putting up 40 and 11s like he did the other day in 110 SuperCoaches. The point's not bad. And Washington, Keyshawn George, Alexander Sarter and co. are probably your trade targets on these teams. Outside of that, what you need to keep in mind with the Week 15 schedule and those teams with 4 games is Week 16 is the double week over the All-Star break. So you have teams with 5 games throughout that period, which is really, really cool. But proceed with caution. That's the same thing going into this week, I reckon. Look at the players who are actually on the All-Star team. Will they play the full complement of games heading into the All-Star break with their coaches knowing, oh, my star, if I play him all these games, he's also not going to get a break at all over All-Star because he'll be there for the weekend in LA. They've got the game. Just keep that in the back of your mind is all I'm saying. And in Week 16, we've got the double round with 6 games. Heaps of teams have got, the 5 games rather. It's like Atlanta, Brooklyn, Charlotte, Chicago, Cleveland, Denver, Indy, Clippers, Lakers, Milwaukee, Knicks, OKC, Orlando, Philly, Phoenix, Portland. It's basically easy to list the teams that don't have 5 games. But in that time period, Boston and Toronto, not only do they not have 5 games, they have 3 games only. So they're the teams we're probably going to avoid in 16. Just keep that in mind. I'm just saying. So yeah, it's always worth looking ahead along that schedule as well and sort of figuring out which teams you want to kind of avoid, jump off possibly. Like for me this week, with Bam only having 3 games, Bam Adebayo and the Miami Heat, they've got 3 games this week. They've only got 4 as well in Week 16. So it makes it a little bit easier for me to go, right, if I can get Bam out for someone who's got 4 this week and 5 next week, laughing. Just got to figure out who that is, hey? So with that in mind, some of my favorite trade targets, I mean, you sort of look at the way that this sort of matches up with like the 4 games this week and the 5 games the following week, there's not too many actual sort of crossovers. It is the Knicks. The problem is Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, maybe they don't play the full complement of 4 beforehand and then 5 in week 16. But it's one that I really kind of like. If I'm going to get the full complement of 9 games across the 2 rounds, kind of wanting to jump on top of it, right? Outside of that, I think it's Philly. So that's maybe, obviously I've got Maxey in my team already. Maybe you look at Embiid, but remember, Embiid doesn't play back-to-backs. So you're probably not going to get the full complement out of him anyway. With the way that the Philadelphia Sixers schedule is going to lay out, there's probably going to be a back-to-back in that 9-game stretch over the 3 weeks, right? Even with the break in the middle, Embiid's probably just not going to play back-to-back. So if you look at the Sixers schedule for the rest of the bit, they have a back-to-back Tuesday, Wednesday this week, and then they've got one Sunday, Monday, February 22, 23, and that's 3 games in 4 nights as well because they've got one on the 20th. So Embiid's a little bit tougher to trust, but if you've got VJ, you feel good. If you've got Maxey, you feel good. Otherwise, we'll sort of be trying to dunk and dodge. If you've already got someone like Jalen Johnson, who's got 3 games this week, but then has the 5 games in week 16, if you've got those dudes, you feel okay about sort of holding on to them. The weird one, I think, for me is like someone like Wemby, who's got 3 games this week, 4 games the week after. Jokic has got the 5-game week in week 16 as well. So probably try to get him in after this week and try to get as much of that. But again, he'll be a part of that sort of cadre going out there for the All-Star break, so who knows. And the Lakers are the other interesting one, right? Because they've got a 5-game week around All-Star. And I've got Luka with these 3 games this week. I'll probably keep him because I've got bigger things I probably need to fix on my team right now. Like with Donovan Mitchell playing only 2 games this week, Cleveland, he's probably going to pop out for me for Ant-Man. Bam probably goes out. And Giddey probably goes back out as well, just because I can't trust that hamstring injury and him to not miss more time. So I think where we're looking at like the favorite trade targets across that, as I sort of mentioned, it's the guys from the Knicks, it's the guys from the Sixers that you're looking at, right? But for this week, I'm probably going to go Ant-Man in for Donnie Mitchell. Jamal Murray has still got a pretty awesome floor, I think, for scoring at the moment. He is an all-star as well, though. So even though the Denver Nuggets have only got 3 games this week, I think the Giddey situation probably worries me more. And Bam just probably doesn't have the top-end scoring that maybe Jamal Murray can get to. Now that Jokic is back, the pressure might be off him. You might see his scoring sort of escalate even more. Embiid's the big question, but as mentioned, a couple of back-to-backs in there. So out of the 9 games, he's probably maximum going to play 7. So you got to think about that as a 3 and 4 week game week for him. Brunson and Cat are probably where I'm going to land. Amen Thompson for this week because Houston have got the 4 games and look really, really good. Outside of this, I mean, are we looking at some cash cows? That's kind of the interesting spot right now. I think I've got mostly primos in my team now. It is still important over these last few weeks to keep making cash. For me, Simone Fondecchio, Simone, it didn't quite make as much cash as I was hoping this week. I didn't move, I think, in the end, Maxime Renault, and he actually had a really good week to the point where he's got a really low break even this week, which is nice. So we'll see what happens there. But in terms of the actual big cash cows this week, you've got Gui Santos, because he had a 64 last week, not bad. Don't know if you want to bring him at 5.4 mil. Pele Larson is playing a lot for the Miami Heat. He had 100 this week. Absolutely goes whack. So his break even is -7. You've got Drew Smith. Break even is -7 as well with 84 this week. Dylan Brooks is crushing it. Dylan the villain, 9.9 mil. He had 112 this week. And with those guys playing 3 games weeks though this week, you just got to really sort of attempt. If you're thinking about them on your bench, that's fine for cash cows. But otherwise, don't think about them, being on the actual floor. Keon Ellis has just been traded to Cleveland. He's going to break even of 6. It's an interesting one. And what I do like is that Dylan Harper is now up to 7.1 mil. It was a really good week last week, I thought. 61. Really found his scoring touch again. Pretty happy with that. Julian Strawther on the Denver Nuggets. He's got a break even of 9. He had a 41 last week. And then elsewhere, I mean, Nick Clifford, break even of 11. There's enough guys there. Jared McCain sort of came along as well. Now with Paul George out, they'll probably need a little bit more scoring punch from him. One to keep an eye on, especially at 4.4 mil. Not a bad sort of swap out for like someone like Nemhard or one of those other higher price guards. So plenty in there for your cash making. Jared Allen, break even of 14 though. 13.5 mil. Mobley out for a little bit. We know that his rebounding numbers will be fine. His scoring will be solid. So I think he's got a pretty high floor. He's priced at 13.5 mil though. I just don't know if priced at that, he'll probably make maybe $1 million over the next little bit, but it's just a big price point to jump in, right? Otherwise, always keep an eye on the Brooklyn rookies. You've got Nolan Traore and stuff like that, but Danny Wolf and co, they're just absolutely getting their heads kicked in right now, though. So it's a bit hard, right? So I think what I'm going to do this week in terms of my trades, it looks very much like I'll send out Josh Giddey for Amen Thompson, Donnie Mitchell for Ant-Man, Bam Adebayo was in my flex spot. In there, probably it's going to be Cat or Brunson, maybe even Josh Hart. I'll kick the tires on. Brunson's had like a really interesting couple of weeks. Like the scoring output has been solid. A couple of inefficient games here and there. The assist numbers have dropped off a little bit. I think that'll probably turn a bit of a corner. So it's a really kind of strange situation. Julius Randle's obviously another one that I might dig into just because I think he's had a pretty solid little run of late. And the Wolves have had a pretty okay, like they had a great win against OKC the other day. And he had, his last 3 games, he had 15 against Golden State, 32 against Dallas, not bad, 22 against OKC, and 33 again against Memphis. So they play Memphis again tomorrow. They've got Toronto, the Pelicans, and the Clippers this week. Not a bad matchup. And that's kind of why I've got Ant-Man, I think, coming in. As long as he plays all the games, I'm all right. But otherwise, I don't know. I think it's either going to be Brunson, Randle, or Cat. If I can afford Cat, he might be the one where I feel like the pretty decent floor, but Randall's pretty tempting with that sort of schedule matchup as well, right? So we'll see how we go. And if you look at some of the other, guys that the Knicks are going to be playing, I mean, it's like OG Anunoby had a massive week. He'll sort of pop off. Like the Knicks play Washington. Who else do they have on the slate? They got Denver, Detroit, and Boston. So it's a bit tougher, right? Maybe we go with Randall. Still, I don't know. There's lots of really fun ones in there this week. In terms of other cash cows, let me know who you think you'll probably go. There was just sort of like that raft of guys around the GG Jackson, sort of Jalen Wells, Memphis types, where their break-evens now in like the teens, and it gets a little bit janky on us. And if you look at someone like Dylan Cardwell, who we talked about last week, still looking pretty good. The guys who scored lots last week, I mean, that's the Dylan Brooks break-even of 1 after the 112 last week. He will go up in price substantially. And at 9.9 mil, it's not a bad one, but again, Phoenix have only got 3 games this week. So tricky, bit odd. Other break-evens that are super low. Moussa Diabate, 101 this week. That's an interesting one because Charlotte, again, he's only playing 3 games, but Charlotte are just a machine right now. When they're healthy, they just keep putting up heaps of points. So anyway, so Josh Hart had 98 last week. That is interesting, isn't it? Captaincy is probably the last one for this week. I will probably still slap the C onto, I feel like Maxey might be the one who benefits with Paul George out again, can put up some pretty hefty scoring numbers. It's either that or maybe LP Şengün, who's got the 4 games. Wemby's only got 3 for me. I don't know if I can trust Ant-Man to, top out Maxey's production, so I'm probably going to throw the C on Maxey and see how we go. But there you go. So I think it'll be Donnie Mitchell, Josh Giddey, Bam out for me. In comes Ant-Man, Amen Thompson, and probably, I talked it out, might be Randall and might be Brunson, but we'll see how we go. Righto. Well, let us know how you're going, what's going on. This has been Jim Does SuperCoach for week 15. Remember, if you enjoyed NFL Supercoach, and if you're into your NFL, we've got a big NFL Australia Super Bowl party at the Catfish in Melbourne. It's in Fitzroy. It's always a good time, so come out, hang out, party hard. That's what we do on the big Super Bowl Monday. Otherwise, get around NFL Australia for the big Super Bowl preview. We've got NBA Straya back to sort of daily schedule at the moment, which is really cool. Rate, review, and start. Subscribe, comment, whatever. All those shows on your podcast apps. You know what to do. It's 2026. Rate, star, subscribe, all that stuff. But that's it. Big thanks to Josh and Dylan Reddis for the intro and outro song. This has been Jim Does SuperCoach. Here's to a big week 15. Come on. Let's get back up into this top 100. What do you reckon? Sounds good? Great. All right. Happy super coaching.